We have a pretty small group here at the studio in Durham, and that's got a lot of great things about it that we really like. You know, for example, we're at a size where we can all go around every Friday and look at everyone else's monitor.
This is actually the smallest production team I've ever been with, outside of pre-production, where you might end up with 15 people, or sometimes as small as like 10 people or something like that. There's just a greater chance of people casually talking to each other, or informally talking to each other, and information getting passed from person to person that way.
I feel like the culture that we have at the studio in Durham is kind of a hybrid in a lot of ways. Definitely the foundation is pure Insomniac. At the same time, we've got just a little bit of a startup vibe out here. You know, we're in this like kind of low-tech office space in a lot of ways, and it's like when you get your first car as a teenager, and that car is like a '78 Impala, and it gives you this great feeling of freedom because you can just kind of wreck it a little bit. That's kind of how we go through things here. We just throw ourselves in and kind of do whatever it takes to get things done.
We're going down!
We opened up the studio here in January of 2009, and we've been working on All for One since that very day. We knew that we wanted to make a Ratchet title that was all about cooperative play even back then.
But some of the earliest discussions that led to All for One were talking about getting Ratchet and Clank on the screen as playable characters at the same time. In true Insomniac fashion, like once we kind of got to the point where we had that in place, and we decided to do that, we're like, we really have to add 2 more characters.
She was taking a memo.
I mean, we knew Captain Qwark had to be the 3rd, and there were a lot of discussions about who the 4th would be, and I can't for the life of me remember who suggested Dr. Nefarious. One of those times where somebody throws out an idea and you just know, oh, that's perfect, we absolutely have to do that.
The story in All for One is kind of a little bit of a mystery. We've put 4 characters who don't really like each other at all into a situation where they're forced to work together. And part of the reason they're forced to work together is that they're on an unfamiliar planet called Planet Magnus, and they've been brought there by a strange galactic entity called Ephemeris, the creature collector. So much of what you're learning as a player as you play through is the origin of that enormous Ephemeris spacecraft and the backstory of the planet that you're on.
I stood atop Zuzo Fields and watched in horror as Commander Spog and his armies lay waste to Uzo City.
Well, for the comic series, we really wanted to answer the question of how did Dr. Nefarious survive, what's he been up to, and how do our heroes arrive in the situation that they're in at the very beginning of All for One. So I thought it'd be funny to have Captain Qwark become president of the galaxy, because really, like, where else can he go from everything that he's done? He's got to fail upwards and become president of the galaxy, right? We definitely got carried away with the amount of dialogue that we needed to write in this game, but we were having so much fun writing for Captain Qwark and Dr. Nefarious that I ended up going over budget within like the first 6 months of the project. We ended up with, I think, double or maybe even triple what our initial budget was set out to be, because it's just so much fun having these characters interact with each other.
A faulty ion switch, a malfunctioning tether pin, so many ways to explain why our president fell to his doom.
Ratchet Nefarious is plotting to assassinate me again.
Nefarious, stop plotting to assassinate Qwark.
We really wanted to make it feel not only like they were fighting together, but they were also fighting with each other. So we've got all sorts of conversations that play between all 4 characters that really add to the feeling of this sort of ragtag group of heroes that are thrown together against their own will in order to fight their way off this planet.
For the sake of our own survival, and for drama, we must set aside our petty squabbles and act as a singular unit.
For now.
We do a ton of concept images for all of these Ratchet games. We literally have more worlds and ideas than could ever get into these games. And I remember one of the earliest pieces of concept art we had in this game was the Wigwam. It was just a gorgeous piece of concept art, and it was something that when you showed this to anybody, they looked at that and they said, oh my gosh, we want to have that in the game. Like, I remember showing it to our folks back in Burbank. Everybody that saw it was like, oh, this thing is so amazing.
I worked up this painting, and it was one of those images that hopefully started to point in a given direction. And I think that's what the team started to gravitate a little bit towards, is that we can have 4 players, we can have these really large epic moments, and we can hopefully make these things work on screen. So we built the large worm, and we built some of the environment, we did some diorama work, and we really started to flesh out what this space is really about and how do we stage this really big moment.
I built the model, and we had to tackle a new poly count, a new game scale. In the Ratchet games in the past, we haven't really tackled an enemy that big before. Everyone kind of got together and worked on it and had a clear idea of what a big, scary enemy was going to look like in our game.
It's a weird character, you know, it's got like 14 legs and 10 eyes, and she's really long, but she's really big. Because of that, like, you know, we really had to work together closely to get the geometry to sort of do what it needed to do.
Essentially became the first new creature that we rigged, like modeled, rigged, and animated in this game. At the time, it was just for this diorama. But we put through all the paces. It was a test run for our whole pipeline for how we were going to handle new creatures and new characters and stuff.
You know, we knew from the very early going that we wanted this to be a single screen co-op experience, because we think that's the best way to give players a shared experience. To address that on the art side, we took a look at the characters. The first thing we did was drop our 4 main characters together on screen.
In the previous Ratchet games, a lot of times you would see a character within a cinematic. And these cinematics were set up in a very particular way, just like movies, where an actor, if the actor's taller or shorter, they can compensate for that with, you know, with these cameras. When you're playing all on screen at the same time and you're shooting from one camera angle, you realize that sometimes some tweaks need to be made. So Qwark got a little bit bigger, Clank got actually a little bit bigger as well. And then Ratchet just got a little bit more exaggerated with some of his proportions, just to make sure that he could read against this kind of broad canvas of not only other characters, but these environments as well.
And Nefarious stayed virtually the same. We got him a little narrower, his head got a little bit bigger, and that was just to sort of push the emphasis that he was a little bit scarier and he had a little bit more of a, you know, a bigger cranium.
Hold me like you used to before you became a flesh-eating zombie.
Qwark, would you?
You twit! You dare lay your squishy hands on me?
There's definitely a lot of nooks and crannies that I love about this game. There is just this high attention paid to the small things, and for me, growing up on the East Coast, within the Northeast, I have these vivid memories of being on the beach as a kid with my grandparents and going to Newport and stuff like that, where there's docks and ships and everything else. And here we had a level called Octonaut K, which was really the first time we've ever done a seaside town within the Ratchet universe. Overall, we tend to go towards metal and robots and steel. This level has more wood in it than I think any other Ratchet level. It was a real new visual approach for us, and I think as a result, we were able to approach it with a really unique take, because I haven't seen any other games do it the way that we have in this game. So, you're fighting jellyfish, and you're seeing buoys and ropes, and fighting big sea monsters. It's kind of like this ode to that old sea life that's been a lot of fun, to watch come to life.
I'm actually starting to like it here. Sure, it's a dangerous planet riddled with murderous robots and exotic predators, but take away all that, and what do you have? A presidential retreat / water park.
Can I kill him now?
No.
I can make it look like an accident.
How?
Ratchet.
All right, no.
We've hacked into an old spy satellite to monitor your positions.
And we've set up a comm link with GromoNet. If you need weapons, just access one of these pods and wire us some bolts. We'll teleport the supplies to the surface.
Ratchet games have been all about the weapons since the very early going. Really the first thing we did was, start with an action platformer and then add this layer of weapons and progression over top of it. Now you still have weapons that you buy with bolts, and each weapon does a very unique and powerful thing. But the co-op twist that we've added is that when you use weapons together, you get an even more powerful effect.
Using multiple pyroblasters on the same target will cause it to explode in a fiery magma blast.
So if two people have the same weapon equipped, we give you what's called a co-op overload effect, where you're doing more damage and kind of building up the power of the weapon together.
Any of the weapons do this now, so you can be using the critter strike on one of the enemies, and two people use it and they build it up on a big enemy, and then when you get the big explosion at the end, if there's any little surrounding enemies nearby that big enemy, they'll also be transformed by the blast.
I'm a big fan of the plasma bomb launcher just because it does a lot of damage. You can fire it pretty quickly, and you can lob it over cover and whatnot, so I think it's a pretty darn effective weapon.
The flamethrower is actually one of my favorite weapons, just because you can knock out a lot of enemies just by sort of running around in circles a little bit.
I think the blitzer has turned in to one of my favorite weapons. We didn't use it a lot at the beginning, but we tweaked it a lot, and we put some awesome effects on there, of course, and it's just become really helpful in the competitive aspect. We found there are several weapons that help you compete with your friends, and they give you the leg up. I won't give those away, but there are ways to do that.
We do bolt dash, where you're all trying to get the most bolts you can. How many critters can you get? How many enemies can you kill? And it's been pretty breakneck pace, in these games. And, we don't pull any punches.
You can play the game cooperatively, and you can have an awesome time. The competitive thing is sort of an opt-in that's on top of everything else. If you're the best, if you're really competitive, you get the most balls, you're going to get the cool weapons.
Way to go, cadet!
Terawatt is a kind of a mixed bag level. We have light and dark gameplay. We have kind of a racing / cooperative gameplay in there. The lighting is really nice. We have several different environments going on in that one level.
It's so much fun to play, especially with the animators and I will play test together. It has just such a diverse gameplay in it in each segment. I think that level for me stands out quite a bit, and it's gorgeous as well. So there's that too.
In Terawatt, there's one segment where you get on the back of a big guardian robot, and you have a turret. All 4 characters have a turret on the back of the robot, and he stomps through the world as you're shooting down enemies and eventually fighting other big guardian robots that are trying to stop you. As you can imagine, getting all this stuff to work together was quite a lot of work, and involved people from multiple programmers, multiple animators, designers, just all the way through the pipeline, getting all that stuff to work.
Say cheese!
Cheese! It is a small team, but the people that are going to be working on this thing, there's a lot of collaboration that goes along, and a lot of kind of extra disciplinary, creative development that pushes, something that's this kind of simple, really compelling idea into, 10 or 15 minutes of memorable gameplay.